Yeah, it's Cinco de Mayo. Cinco de Mayo Day. It's the 5th of May, which
Cinco de
is
Mayo.
great. And so what a great celebration day. I know that it is a Mexican holiday. I'm not quite sure if it's the day that Mexico was founded. I really don't. Their Independence Day. Well, I think it's great. So happy Cinco de Mayo, especially for the people that I know and love down in Fort Walton Beach, uh, Iglesia Mana Church. What a great group of people. So blessed to be associated with them. But tonight we start a new Torah portion, and we start a Torah portion called Acharei Mot. Acharei Mot begins in the book of Leviticus. And when you go back to Leviticus chapter 16, verse 1, Acharei Mot means after the death. And you go, wow, what a strange name to name a Torah portion. So I'm looking at chapter 16, verse 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses, Acharei Mot. Acharei is the Hebrew word after, and mot is the word for death. Acharei Mot. After the death. After the death of who? After the death of the two sons of Aaron, when they offered before the Lord and died. I'm going to take you back a few chapters to Leviticus chapter 10. In Leviticus chapter 10, when we see Nadab and Abihu bringing forth strange fire, in verses 1 and 2, it says, and Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, took either of them his censer and put therein, and put incense there, and offered strange fire before the Lord, which he commanded them not. And there went out fire from the Lord and devoured them, and they died before the Lord. Now, there's all kinds of speculations, at least 5, that are founded in Scripture as to why their lives were taken. But what I want to draw your attention to is down in verse 9. In verse 9, after Nadab and Abihu have died, the Lord speaking to Aaron, not speaking to Moses, to Aaron, speaking to Aaron, says, do not drink wine nor strong drink, you nor your sons with you, when you go into the tabernacle of the congregation, lest you die. It should be a statute forever. And in the process of this death of Nadab and Abihu, why does the Lord bring up, don't drink wine if you're getting ready to go do ministry in the tabernacle? One of the 5 reasons why many people believe that Nadab and Abihu died was because they were slightly inebriated. So I want to take you over to Ephesians chapter 5. In Ephesians chapter 5, the Apostle Paul, writing to the church at Ephesus, he gives us a very, very strong exhortation, the exact same one that was given to Aaron after the death of his sons. And that is in verse 18, he says, and be not drunk with wine wherein is excess, but instead be filled with the Spirit, speaking yourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your hearts to the Lord, giving thanks always unto God and the Father in the name of Yeshua, submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. So when you look at this passage, you go, oh, okay, he doesn't want me intoxicated. Same warning that was given to Aaron, that from this day forward, make sure that you don't have any wine on your breath. Make sure you don't have any wine in your system. What ends up happening with the wine is it causes us to kind of get a little bit loopy, allow something else besides the Spirit of God to govern us. Tonight in Acharei Mot, we have a double Torah portion. We have Acharei Mot that goes along with Kedoshim. And I want to spend some time in Kedoshim in chapter 19 tonight. But the first thing that I want to do is I want to ask a question. I want you to think about this. What do you do after the death? So Aaron and Nadab have died. What is Aaron supposed to do now? What am I supposed to do when I experience death? And hopefully, during the counting of this Omer, you're experiencing death to a certain degree. Dying to self, living to Christ. Less of me, more of him. As John the Immerser, John the Baptist said in John chapter 1. He said, I must decrease, he must increase. And tonight what I want to do is I want to address the topic out of this Torah portion. What do I do after I've offered myself up and I'm dead to myself? If I turn back a couple of pages and I go to the book of Galatians. In Galatians, the Apostle Paul makes a really, really bold statement. And he tells us that he dies daily. Now, back in Galatians chapter 2, verse 20, he says, I'm crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live. But it's not me that lives. And this life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. And the Apostle Paul makes it quite clear that every day, one of his ultimate goals is to die to himself. He knows from Romans chapter 7 that whoever he submits to, that's who he's going to become a servant to. If he submits to the flesh, he'll have the flesh become a bondservant to that. If he submits to the Spirit, he'll of the Spirit submit to that. But you can't serve both at the same time, just like you can't fear God and fear men at the same time. You could fear God 1 minute, then stop fearing him and fear man the next minute and go back and forth and be double-minded. We're all capable of doing that. But the question is, can I die? Can I die daily? Now, what do I do after I die? And I die to myself. Then I want to take you over to 1 Peter chapter 1. In 1 Peter chapter 1, a passage that many would not even give a second thought to. We know it most likely by heart. But what does it mean? In 1 Peter chapter 1, beginning in verse 13, let's stick with our wine, not drinking mentality. Wherefore, gird up the loins of your mind. What does that mean? Well, in the Middle East, men wear long robes. And if they're going to run, what they do is they hike up that robe and they tie it in a knot so that they can run and not trip. When he says, gird up the loins of your mind, he's saying, okay, just like you would wear a long dress, you want to gird that up so that your mind doesn't get tripping over itself. Wherefore, gird up the loins of your mind. If your mind's anything like the majority of people, you know that your mind's running 100 miles an hour. And one of the crazy things is when my imagination takes over and I don't take those thoughts captive and present them obedient to Christ, I could be on a wild goose chase. So gird up the loins of your mind, be sober, no drinking, be sober, and hope to the end. Hope to the end for what? For the grace that is to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, not fashioning yourself according to the former lusts in your ignorance, but as he which has called you is holy, So you shall be holy in all manner of behavior, because it is written, be holy, for I am holy. Now, we find this verse that Peter's quoting from this week's Torah portion. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 16 is quoting from Leviticus chapter 19, verse 2. Now, if we asked 100 individuals, can you describe for me what it means to be holy? The majority of people, and I know this because I've probably interviewed 100 people with this question, will say, well, it means to live righteously. But that's not what holiness is. Holiness means to be set apart. If the world is here, then I'm supposed to be over here. As Yeshua prayed in John chapter 17, he prayed that we wouldn't be taken out of the world, but that we would not be overcome by the world. In other words, while you're living in the world, you have to maintain this separateness. Let me give you a picture of what this looks like. If you go back to the book of Luke, and you go to Luke chapter 5, and when I was praying for you and many other people today, this passage was going through my mind. Let me give you the backdrop to the story. Yeshua is calling his disciples. You may remember that I had this in your morning study today. When he was calling his first disciples, he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret. And there he sees two ships standing by the lake. But the fishermen were not in their boats. They were washing their nets. Right, that's what fishermen have to do. You don't take care of your equipment's going to fail. There's an expression that says, you take care of your equipment will take care of you. So the boys are washing their nets. Now look at verse 3. Verse 3 in Luke chapter 5 is the one that I really want to draw your attention to for the whole study of tonight, even though we'll be back in the book of Leviticus. And he entered into one of the ships, which was Simon's, and he prayed him that he would thrust out a little from the land. And he sat down and he taught the people out of the ship. Okay, so here's the picture. Yeshua is on the shore. There's a crowd of people. Peter and the boys are off washing their nets. Yeshua calls Peter, gets into his boat, and says, hey, I'm too close to the crowd. Could we push off of the shore just a little bit, just the right distance, so that I can speak to the people? And before I go any further, here's what I want you to be considering in your prayer time, as well as your function time. Now, think about if Yeshua would have stayed on the shore, and he would have talked to the crowd, he would have been able to talk to the people who are immediately right in front of him. And then the whole crowd wouldn't have been able to get the message. So what he did was he separated himself from the crowd. Now, if he would have separated himself really, really far, then the crowd couldn't hear him. But if he separated himself the right distance from the crowd, then the whole crowd could hear him. What's the point that I'm making with you in regards to be holy, for I am holy, says the Lord, from 1 Peter 1:16? Well, the first thing that I want to share with you is don't be stuck in the crowd. Don't act like the crowd, look like the crowd. The crowd is just they're fair weather fans at best. When you're winning, they're on your side. When you're losing, they're not on your side. And if you're too close to people, like many ministries today. Many ministries, what they do is they try to look just like the world to draw people to them. They're too close. You have to separate, and in that separation, get just the right distance to where now there's a clear separation between you and them, and then the crowd can hear because you're set apart, you're holy. Now, some ministries are so set apart that they don't reach anybody except for the people who have the same mindset as them. There's a balance of finding the perfect balance. And as I was praying for you earlier today, and I'll be praying again in the morning for everybody on my list, as I was praying, Father, give us wisdom to know just how far away to be to where you can reach the most people, but not so far that nobody even knows we're there. So Yeshua, after in verse 4, after he left speaking, he said unto Simon, okay, I'm done teaching. Now let's go out into the deep and let down your nets for a draught, for a huge boatload of fish. That's what we want to do. And Simon goes, we toiled all night long, but since I just saw the effect you had on the crowd, whatever you say, that's what I'll do. They go out, they put the fishing nets on the other side of the boat, bingo, bango, bongo, they're catching a boatload of fish. And that was great. But what's amazing with these nets tearing and the boats filling up with fish and the boys thinking they're going to drown, they're amazed at what Yeshua did. So what does Yeshua say? In verse 10, and so was also James and John, the sons of Zebedee, which were partners with Simon. And Yeshua said unto Simon, don't be afraid. From this day forward, you're going to catch men. Okay, so let's think about this, all right? Let's think about our own personal lives in Acharei Mot. What do I do after I'm dead to myself? Or after I see somebody that I loved die unnecessarily? What do I do? Well, first thing I do is I take heed to why they died. Number two, therefore I die to myself, and I die daily. Now that I've died to myself, I don't run my agenda. God runs my agenda based on his word. And now I separate from the world because I can reach people being up really, really close. And that's good. But Yeshua was trying to teach a point to Peter and the boys. Peter and the boys, if you're too close to people, they're not going to hear anything. You've got to go away from the shore so that they can hear you. So a large audience, so they don't feel like they're being singled out. So they don't feel like they're a bag of chips and a whole lot more. So they don't think that they're the only reason you're there. No, I want you to catch men. And I just showed you how to do it by separating a certain distance, yet maintaining that contact. The Apostle Paul said this in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, when he said, I become all things to all men so that I may win some. That's what I need to be thinking. I need to be saying, okay, tomorrow's the 24th day of counting the Omer. So on this 24th day, what am I going to be doing? I'm going to be thinking, how can I live holy? How can I live set apart, but not so set apart that people think I'm aloof and such a spiritual giant that I can't identify with them? How do you do that? Pray for wisdom and ask God for guidance. Let's go back to the book of Leviticus and let's go to our Torah portion beginning in chapter 16. The Torah portion, Acharei Mot, is pretty important. I want to jump to chapter 19, to Kedoshim. And what I want to show you to begin with, especially for your notes, as you go back through this Torah portion, you're going to find that 10 times he says, I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord your God. You'll see it 10 times. And normally when I see a phrase repeated over and over and over and over and over again in my Bible, I usually circle it and then I connect to all the dots so that my mind goes, oh, there's a thread all the way through this. So now he says in verse 2, speak to the congregation of the children of Israel and saying to them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Now that's important. He says, you shall be holy. That's your responsibility. You need to do it because I'm holy. And you need to imitate me. He says, I, the Lord your God, am holy. There's a responsibility of me imitating him. And because he's holy, and because I'm his child, then I'm to imitate my Father in heaven. Not being too close to the world, but being the right distance away. And that will be important. Now look at verse 3. He says, you shall fear every man his mother and his father, and keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. Here it is. Here's the statement again. I am the Lord your God. Now look at verse 4. And I want to draw your attention to a concept here in verse 4. And this is very difficult to grab a hold of, though the concept is simple. So let me see if I can explain it well enough. He says, do not turn to idols, nor make to yourselves molten gods. I am the Lord your God. So here you go. There's the third time you've seen I am the Lord your God in 3 verses. And you'll see it in this Torah portion 10 times. But I want you to pay attention to the word idols. Because you and I, when we think of idols, we might think of a statue that we bow down to. But this is really, really strange how this is written. I'm going to spell it out for you. It's the word ha, H-A, which is the word the in Hebrew. Ha, Elohim. And you say Elohim, that sounds like Elohim. It is. It's very close. Instead of it being E-L-O-H-I-M, Elohim, it's Elohim. And you go, well, what's the difference between it? E-L-I-L-I-M. What's the difference between the two? The night and day. Because what the word ha-Elohim is it is a term that God uses to mock all of the little gods, like they are like little puppies compared to full-grown Doberman pinschers. They have no power. They can't redeem. They can't speak. They can't deliver. They can't comfort. They can't intercede. They can't do any of those things. And what God's saying is, he's saying, okay, out of the 70 commandments that I'm going to give to you in this Torah portion, out of the 70 commandments that I give you, which will teach you how to be holy towards the people, towards the nations, it's important that you know that I am the Lord your God. And you need to know that all these other little gods that you kind of give your time and attention to, they're just Elohim. They're little dudes. They're little puppy dogs. They're little trinkets. They're nothing. And what God is doing is he's mocking when he says, don't turn to idols, to these gods that can't redeem, that can't deliver, that can't demonstrate grace, that can't be merciful, that can't bless you. Don't give your attention. They're nothing. They're little. Now you say, well, what would those be in my life? Well, that's a good question. And that's something I need to think of. What are things that, well, I'll confess, I talk to Suzanne on a pretty regular basis, probably once every month and a half, and I emphasize to her at this clinic, we're all about getting the body clean from the inside, all about the right supplements, all the right things. A person calls, has an issue, and so we automatically go boongity 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 boom. Here's what we do. But we have to be careful, because that could be the supplements, the hyperbaric chamber, the Tesla med bed, the colonic table, the massage. They could be idols. And you go, what? Yeah, they could become the little Elims, the things that we're finding our healing in. Now, are they instruments? Yes. But it's just like people today. When somebody gets sick, first thing they do is they go to the medicine cabinet. They call up their doctor, Elims. We do the same thing with our sports heroes. We do the same thing with our musicians. We do the same with Hollywood. We do the same with our government. We do the same with all their Elims. He says, don't turn to the Elims. So if I was writing notes on my notepad tonight or tomorrow or whichever day you're going to be listening to this, then I want to tell you, I want to make a list of the things. What do I, when it's crisis time, what do I do? Where do I turn? Where am I turning besides the Lord my God? I am the Lord your God. Where am I turning? Because he says, I am the Lord your God, which is so important. Now, jump over to verse 12. In verse 12, he says, and you shall not swear by my name falsely, neither shall you profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. And remember, I said 10 times in this Torah portion, you'll find I am the Lord your God. And we've already seen it 3 times. Now in verse 12, he doesn't say, I am the Lord your God. He says, I am the Lord. And he'll say it 10 times. And you'll say, well, what's the difference? I am the Lord your God is a description of the one who is the merciful, covenant-keeping God who holds accurate judgment. When he just says, I am the Lord, he's only emphasizing I'm the covenant-keeping, personal, relational God. Now, what's important for me to notice is that he says, I'm the Lord. And then he goes through and he starts saying things like, you shall not defraud your neighbor. Now, defrauding is a nice King James word. And defraud means to take that individual beyond what they can handle. Maybe emotionally, they're not ready for something. Maybe physically, they're not ready for something. Maybe spiritually, they're not ready for something. You don't want to defraud your brother, defraud your neighbor. And he says, don't rob him. The wages of him that is hired shall not abide with you all night until the morning. Make sure that he gets paid what he's supposed to get paid. Make sure that individual, don't defraud them. And you say, well, why are you saying this? Because this is, I am the Lord. Notice this isn't about a harsh judgment. This is about the beauty of covenant relationship and personal. Look at verse 14. You shall not curse the deaf, nor put a stumbling block before the blind, but you shall fear your God. Why? Because I am the Lord. Do you see? Not I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord. Anytime you're seeing repeatable patterns in scripture, we want to open up our eyes and say, oh, you must be trying to teach me something. But I'm not done yet. Keep going down to verse 15 and 16. Verse 16 is the one that I really want. But 15 says, you shall do no unrighteousness in judgment, You shall not respect the person of the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty, but in righteousness shall you judge your neighbor. So we're actually supposed to be judging our neighbor. And if we read Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 4, I'm supposed to judge my neighbor. I'm supposed to pull the speck out of his eye, but I have to make sure I've got the big beam out of my eye. Take the big honking log out of your own eye so you're not beating him half to death. And then you can pull the little speck out of his eye, because he'll know that you are humble enough to take care of the issues inside of you. I've probably said it 50 times, if I've said it once on these Zoom calls, that anytime I'm finding a flaw in somebody, do you know why I'm so sensitive in finding that flaw? Because I can see it in myself. The issues that I used to have that I don't have anymore, if I see those in somebody, it doesn't bother me. It just doesn't bother me. But if it's still lingering on the inside of me, oh my stars, it bothers me. Keep reading in verse 16. And this is really big, especially during this time of counting the Omer. You shall not go up and down as a talebearer among your people, neither shall you stand against the blood of your neighbor. Now that's the way that it reads in the King James English. Let me say it again. You don't go up and down as a talebearer. So that means I'm not looking to speak and say things about people who are here or people who are down here. I'm not going up and down as a talebearer. Now, angels go up and down, ministering, but by going up and down myself and being a talebearer, that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. This is part of how to be holy, how to be set apart. Notice what he says. Neither shall you stand against the blood of your neighbor. In Hebrew, this is the phrase ta'amod al dam. You go, okay, so what does that mean? Ta'amod al dam. It literally means so that you're not standing in your neighbor's blood. What? He says, neither shall you stand in the blood of your neighbor, in your neighbor's blood. What does that mean? Well, let me show you. Go over to Psalms. Go over to Psalm 27. And let me show you what King David said. And let me explain to you what it means when I'm gnawing on somebody, speaking against them, have guile in my lips, have bitterness and animosity towards them. In Psalm 27, verse 1 is a very familiar verse to us. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked, even my enemies and my foes, came upon me to do what? Eat my flesh. What does that mean? To eat my flesh. Is that some kind of cannibalistic ritual? No. This is a Hebrew idiom, which means when my enemies are eating my flesh, they're speaking and destroying my character. And when you eat the flesh, it causes the body to bleed. When it causes the body to bleed, the individual who's speaking against another person, you're literally cannibalizing him spiritually, and you're standing in their blood. You're murdering them. You're murdering them with your tongue. You're murdering them with your words. You're murdering them by slandering their character. You're murdering when you're talking to somebody else. Now, I have no problem talking face to face to somebody and telling him how the cow eats the cabbage. That's not this. That's not standing in the blood of your neighbor. I am the Lord. Isn't that amazing? He didn't say, I am the Lord your God. He said, I am the Lord. He's using his covenant, relational, personal, gracious, tender, compassionate name. But when I'm speaking evil of other people, I'm not doing any of those things. I'm forgetting that he's the Lord, and I'm forgetting that I'm supposed to be imitating him. Do you see? Holiness is not just going to church. In fact, that's not holiness hardly at all. Holiness is not just going to a Bible study. Holiness is a lifestyle of finding the right distance apart from the world so that you can reach them, but they can't influence you in the negative. You've got that distance between you and them. And that's why when you go over to chapter 20 and you look at the verse 7, notice what he says. Sanctify yourselves, therefore, and be holy, for I am the Lord your God. Okay, that's important. Now, you guys know that I love gematria. I love numerics of every letter and every word in Hebrew. Now, it's not an exact science. There is errors in it, that's for sure. But sometimes the insights that you gain from it are mind-boggling. For instance, when he says that I'm supposed to sanctify myself, so I'm going to set myself apart, like we saw in Luke chapter 5, and then I'm going to be holy. So I'm going to set myself apart, and then I'm going to carry out a behavior that's going to validate that I'm set apart. Be holy. Why? Because I'm the Lord your God. And you shall keep my statutes and do them. I'm the Lord which sanctifies you. Now, if we were to take every Hebrew letter in verse 7 and add up the numeric value, it would equal 2,043. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, there's only one verse in the entire Torah, only one that's like that. It's found over in the book of Deuteronomy. It's in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 14. Has the exact numeric value, which is amazing. Notice what he says. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 14. He says, you shall not go after other gods of the gods of the people which are round about you. Wow. I don't need to pursue after their gods. Why? Because they're Elims. They're little gods. They're not powerful. They can't even talk. They can't walk, can't breathe. You carved them. You elevated them. And I think this is one of the reasons why it's so important for me to say, how am I doing in my journey? Do I look just like the world, like many ministries are trying to do? That's how we reach people, is by meeting them where they are. Yeshua never did that. Yeshua never dressed like them, didn't talk like them, didn't sing like them, didn't worship like them, didn't act like them, didn't participate in the events that they did. Yeshua never did that. He always maintained a distance far enough to where it was clear that there was a distinction, and yet a distance that was close enough to where they knew that he cared. That's what the big emphasis that I want to give to you tonight is. What do I do after death? I live in resurrection power. I live a holy life. I set myself apart far enough to where there's a clear distinction, and close enough to where I can make an impact. And that's what's important. So if I can do that, then that makes a huge, huge difference. Now, if I can find it, it just popped into my head. I'm going back to chapter 16. And I am looking for one particular animal. And I'm looking for, I believe it's in verse, let me see, I think it's in verse 10. It says, but the goat on which the lot fell to be the scapegoat shall be presented alive before the Lord to make an atonement with him and to let him go for a scapegoat into the wilderness. Now, when you look at this, you may notice that what we have here is we've got this beautiful picture here of the goat. The scapegoat is mentioned 3 times. Now, there's a reason why it's mentioned 3 times, because this goat that's going to have the hands laid on it and is going to be taken out as a zeal, that's going to be taken out and pushed off of a cliff. The reason why it's mentioned 3 times in one verse is because there's 3 different categories of what we would call sin. And that's important.
Leviticus 16.
In Leviticus chapter 16, exactly right, and verse 10. And when we look at this within this exact same passage, he tells us that there are 3 different types of, 3 different types of sin. There is what is called iniquities. There are transgressions, and there are sins. And we've talked about these 3 before, but let me just review you. When this scapegoat is responsible for taking away the iniquities, the transgressions, and the sin, then they're obviously not the same thing. So if they're not the same thing, then what's the difference between them? Iniquities deals specifically, it's the word avon. It deals with the way that I feel guilty. That's what iniquities have to do with. They're actions that I do towards somebody, and then I feel guilty for what I did. And guilt will kill you. It'll flat kill you. And then you've got, after iniquities, then you've got transgressions. Now, transgressions is a completely different ball of wax. That's the Hebrew word pesha, P-E-S-H-A. And transgressions is, I know I'm doing it wrong. I'm doing it wrong anyway. I don't care what the consequences are. I'm doing it my way. And then there's sin. And sin is hatat. That's, I tried to do what was right, but I missed the mark. These are the 3. These are the 3 different types of sins, 3 different categories of sin. There's the iniquity, avon, dealing with my guilt. There is the transgressions, the pesha, dealing with willful sin. And number 3, hatat, sins, my error, my mistake, my failure, my goober. I was shooting for the bullseye, but I just missed it. To miss the mark is sin. We tend to think that all sin is the same. But if we read through this Torah portion, Acharei and Kedoshim, we'll quickly find out that all sin is not the same. Now, remember that there's no sacrifice for willful sin. None. 0, zip, zilch. There never was, there never will be. There's only one way that that transgression can be forgiven. That's through repentance. So the iniquities, the transgressions, and the sin. These three categories right here are significant because they're placed upon the goat who's removed out of the camp. And what it's a reminder of the people to do is to say, hey, you know what? I don't have to be guilty. I'll go back and restore the relationship with my brother. I know that I willfully did that. And now symbolically, the sin of the nation is being pushed off a cliff. So I'm going to repent and I'm not going back down that road again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to live my life the very, very best that I can. And in doing that, then guess what will end up happening? Then what I'll do is I'll live my life in a way that pleases the Father. And that's what I want. I want that life that pleases the Father. And if I can do it, then that'll be the best. If you look at verse 21 of this chapter 16, verse 21, this is where you find all three of them. And Aaron shall lay both his hands upon the head of the live goat and confess over them all the iniquities of the children of Israel, all their transgressions in all their sins, putting them upon the head of the goat, and shall send him away by the hand of a fit man into the wilderness. That's beautiful. That's what's carried away at Yom Kippur. That's what's carried away. In this Torah portion, Acharei Mot, after the death, and Kedoshim, holy, holiness. I'm always reminded that in Orthodox Jewish homes and in many Messianic homes, when children reach the age of 3, their parents start teaching them the book of Leviticus. And this is a book that most adults don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. Why would this book be so important? Because it's the heart of the Torah. It's the center of the Torah. You've got Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And out of the 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. It's the heart of the Torah. I call it the speed bump of the Tanakh, the speed bump of the Torah. Most people want to avoid speed bumps, but I want to dig in on the speed bumps, because if this is the book that teaches me how to be holy, and I'm commanded to be holy even as he is holy, then I need to figure out, how do I be holy? And he says, well, I'm giving you 70 specific commandments on how to be holy. 70. And you say, well, why 70? Because 70 is the number of the nations. Remember? If I'm too close, then only a few people can hear. But if I separate and I go out onto the lake, out onto the waters, out into the picture of the Gentile nations, and I speak, now the whole multitude can hear. But I have to separate, but not too far. The 70 commandments teach me how to love the Lord my God and to love my neighbor as myself, living a life of holiness, set apart, far enough to where you go, I can tell you're a follower of the Messiah. I can tell that you're a follower of the commandments of God. I can tell that you have the testimony of Yeshua and you keep the commandments of God. I can tell. But if you're that close and you're involved in everything that the world does, every PTA meeting, every bowling league, every Lions Club, every fraternal order, everything like that, there's no holiness there. There's none. So as you head into the 23rd day of counting the Omer, my encouragement to you is to remember that he is the Lord your God, and he is your Lord. So be holy. Let him take away you through Azazel, through the scapegoat, through the goat that the lots fell on. Let all of your iniquities and your transgressions and your sin be taken far away from the camp so that you can live a life that's holy for his honor and glory. Let me end the call and open up questions and answer time for you.